The autumn wind whipped through the cornfields, carrying the scent of rain and dry leaves. But Hannah did not feel the cold. Her hand trembled as she reached into the hollow of the old oak tree, her fingers brushing against rough bark until they found it the folded piece of paper. She knew she shouldn't open it. She knew that even touching it was a betrayal of everything her father had taught her about being separate from the world. But as the sound of a buggy approaching echoed down the lane, Hannah made her choice. She unfolded the note, and the words written there would change the course of her life forever. The morning mist still clung to the low valleys of Holmes County, Ohio, wrapping the farmhouse in a blanket of soft white. Inside the Stoltzfus home, the day had begun long before the sun crested the horizon. The smell of wood smoke and strong coffee filled the kitchen, mingling with the yeasty aroma of sourdough bread rising in the warmth of the stove. Hannah Stoltzfus stood by the window for just a moment, her hand resting on the cool glass. At 22 years old, she was a woman of quiet grace, her hair tucked neatly beneath a stiff white prayer covering. Her dress, a sober shade of blue, pinned straight down the front. She was known throughout the district not for her words, for Hannah was often silent, but for her quilts. Her fingers could stitch patterns as intricate as the stars, turning scraps of discarded fabric into masterpieces of geometry and warmth. "Hannah," her mother's voice called gently from the pantry. "The eggs need gathering before the men come in for breakfast." Hannah nodded, turning away from the window and the world outside. "Ya mangem," she replied softly. She stepped out into the crisp morning air, her black boots crunching on the gravel path leading to the barn. The rhythm of the farm was the heartbeat of her life. It was safe. It was predictable. It was holy. But change was coming to the valley, rumbling down the road in the form of a dusty pickup truck. Later that week, the community was buzzing with news. The old covered bridge, a landmark that had stood since her grandfather's time, had been damaged by the spring floods. The county had sent a man to restore it, an English-Terre outsider. Hannah met him on a Tuesday. It was market day in town, and she was manning her family's stand, her quilts draped over wooden racks like colorful flags. The tourists walked by, their cameras clicking, their loud voices jarring against the quiet she preferred. Then a shadow fell over her table. She looked up, expecting another tourist asking to take her picture, which she would politely decline. Instead, she saw a man with sawdust in his hair and calloused hands. He wasn't holding a camera. He was holding the edge of a log cabin-patterned quilt, tracing the stitching with genuine reverence. "I've never seen joinery this perfect," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "Even in wood, it's hard to get lines this straight. In fabric, it's incredible." Hannah felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks. Outsiders usually commented on the colors or how quaint it looked. No one had ever complimented the workmanship like a fellow craftsman. "I am Hannah," she whispered, forgetting for a moment that she should keep her distance. "I'm Caleb." He smiled, and his eyes crinkled at the corners. They were the color of the creek water, after a rain brown and green and deep. "I'm fixing the bridge down the road. I guess we're both in the business of mending things." That was the moment the seed was planted. It wasn't a sin, she told herself later that night as she brushed her hair. It was just a conversation. But as she blew out the kerosene lamp, the darkness of her room felt different. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a waiting room. Weeks passed, and the leaves on the maples began to turn from green to brilliant fire reds and burnt oranges. The harvest was coming, and the work on the farm doubled. Hannah spent her days husking corn and canning peaches, the sticky sweetness coating her fingers. But every Tuesday and Thursday, the route to the lower pasture took her past the covered bridge. She told herself she was checking the fences. She told herself she was looking for stray herbs. But in her heart, she knew she was looking for him. Caleb was always there, working with a focus that reminded her of her father. He didn't use loud, screaming power tools if he could help it. He used hand planes and chisels, respecting the old wood. One afternoon, the heat was unseasonably high. Hannah carried a tin pail of water from the spring, condensation dripping down the sides. She saw Caleb wiping sweat from his brow, looking exhausted. Without thinking, she walked up the embankment. "You look thirsty," she said, offering the ladle. Caleb jumped slightly, then softened when he saw her. "Hannah, I didn't hear you approach." You walk softly." He took the water, drinking deep. "Thank you. That saves my life." They sat on the grassy bank for 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. But in that time, they built a world. Caleb told her about his life in the city, about the noise and the rush, and why he left it to restore old things. He told her about his loneliness, about how modern life felt disconnected. "Everything is disposable out there," Caleb said, looking at the horizon. "People throw things away when they break. Here, you fix them. You keep them. I admire that more than I can say." Hannah felt an ache in her chest. He saw the beauty of her life better than she did sometimes. "It is a good life," she admitted. "But sometimes the silence is very loud." They looked at each other then, a long, lingering look that bridged the gap between the 19th century and the 21st. There was no touching, no impropriety, but there was an understanding, a resonance of souls. "I have to go," Hannah said abruptly, the guilt crashing down on her. "My mungem is waiting." "Will you come back?" Caleb asked, his voice hopeful. I shouldn't. But will you?" She didn't answer, but as she turned to run back through the tall grass, she knew the answer was yes. The meetings became their secret ritual. Caleb began leaving small pieces of wood carving for her in the hollow of an oak tree near the property line, a tiny bird, a perfectly smooth heart. Hannah would leave a small jar of apple butter or a fresh pretzel. It was innocent. It was pure, and by the strict laws of the Ordnung, it was forbidden. The crisis came with the first frost of November. The air was sharp and biting. Hannah was rushing to the bridge, a fresh loaf of pumpkin bread wrapped in a cloth tucked under her apron. She was late. She didn't see the buggy parked on the ridge overlooking the creek. As she reached Caleb, he was smiling, holding out a sketch he had drawn of the finished bridge. She laughed at something he said, a bright, free laugh that she rarely let out at home. "Hannah!" The voice boomed like thunder across the valley. Hannah froze. The blood drained from her face. She turned slowly to see her father, Amos Stoltzfus, standing at the top of the hill. His black broadfall trousers and suspenders were stark against the gray sky, his face a mask of disappointment and fury. "Dot, dot, dot, double quotes," she whispered. Caleb stepped forward, instinctively moving to protect her. "Sir, this is my fault. I engaged her in conversation." Amos ignored the Englishman completely. His eyes were fixed on his daughter. "Get in the buggy, Hannah." Now the ride home was silent. The silence was worse than shouting. It was a heavy, suffocating weight. When they arrived at the farmhouse, her mother was waiting on the porch, sensing the trouble before a word was spoken. Amos sat Hannah down at the kitchen table. The kerosene lamp flickered, casting long shadows. "I have raised you to be a God-fearing woman," Amos said, his voice trembling, not with anger, but with pain. "To be separate, to be light, and I find you laughing with an outsider. A man who does not know our ways. Do you know what this leads to?" "We were only talking, Dad," Hannah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "He is a good man. He respects us. He is of the world." Amos slammed his hand on the table. "And the world will devour you, Hannah. If you marry outside, you leave us. You leave the church. You leave your family. You will be shunned. Is that what you want? To never sit at this table again. To never see your mother's face." The threat hung in the air. The ban. The shunning. To be cut off completely, treated as if she were dead to the community, so that her soul might be saved. "I forbid you to see him," Amos commanded. "You will stay to the house. You will not go to the market. And on Sunday you will confess your fault to the bishop." Hannah fled to her room, burying her face in her quilt, the very quilt she had been stitching with thoughts of Caleb in her mind. She felt torn in two. She loved her family. She loved her faith. But Caleb had awakened a part of her spirit that she didn't know was sleeping. Winter descended on Holmes County with a vengeance. Snow piled high against the barn doors, and the wind howled through the eaves. Hannah did as she was told. She worked until her fingers bled, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, churning butter until her arms ached. She tried to pray the feelings away. She knelt by her bed every night, asking God to remove the image of Caleb's kind eyes from her heart. But the prayers felt empty. One Sunday, after the 3-hour service held in the miller's barn, the bishop pulled Amos aside. Hannah watched from across the room. She saw them looking at her. The community knew. In a small world, there are no secrets. She could feel the eyes of the other women on her, some pitiful, some judgmental. She felt like a ghost in her own life. 3 weeks later, she found the letter. She had been sent to check the fence line after a storm. The hollow oak tree was buried in snow, but she dug it out. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There was an envelope, dry inside a plastic bag. She opened it with trembling fingers. "There is done, the bridge is finished. My work here is done. I am supposed to leave for a job in Indiana on Monday. I cannot leave without asking you one last time. Come with me. I have enough for us to start. I will take care of you. I will respect your faith. You can dress how you like, pray how you like. But we can be together. I will wait at the bridge at midnight on Sunday. If you are not there, I will drive away, and I will never bother you again. Yours, Caleb." The letter burned in her pocket. Sunday was 2 days away. The internal battle was a physical pain. If she went, she gained Caleb, but she lost everything else. Her parents would mourn her as if she had died. She would never hear her father singing hymns in the evening again. She would never quilt with her mother. She would be an alien in a fast, loud world she didn't understand. But if she stayed, she would live with a what-if that would haunt her until her dying day. Sunday night came. The house was silent. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly. "Tick-tock! Stay go! Stay go!" Hannah rose from her bed. She dressed in the dark. She packed a small bundle, her Bible, a change of clothes, and a small wooden bird Caleb had carved for her. She crept down the stairs, avoiding the creaky step. She reached the back door. Her hand touched the cold iron latch. She looked back at the kitchen. She saw her father's Bible on the table. She saw her mother's apron hanging on the hook. She thought of the community that had raised her, the way they came together when a barn burned down, the way they cared for the widows. It was a life of sacrifice, yes, but it was a life of deep, abiding love. She opened the door. The cold air hit her face. Hannah ran through the snow. The moon was full, illuminating the white world in a ghostly blue light. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She reached the covered bridge. Caleb's truck was there, the engine idling softly, white exhaust puffing into the air. Caleb was standing by the tailgate, looking at his watch. When he saw her, his face lit up with relief. "Hannah, you came." He took a step toward her, his arms open. Hannah stopped 10 feet away. She was crying, hot tears freezing on her cheeks. "I came," she sobbed, "to say goodbye." Caleb stopped. His arms fell to his sides. "What?" "Hannah, no, you don't have to stay here. You're unhappy. I can see it." "I am not unhappy, Caleb," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "I am struggling. There is a difference. I love you. I think I have loved you since you bought my quilt." "Then come with me," he pleaded. "We can figure the rest out." "I cannot," she whispered. "My roots are here. My God is erring. If I leave, I tear out a part of my soul that can never be stitched back together. I would be with you, but I would not be whole. And eventually, you would hate me for my sadness." Caleb looked at her for a long time. The silence of the winter night wrapped around them. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He saw the ancient strength of her people in the set of her jaw. "I could never hate you," he said softly. He reached into his truck and pulled out a small box. "I made this for you. I was going to give it to you when we left. But ... He walked over and placed it in her hand. He didn't try to kiss her. He respected her decision too much for that. He simply took her gloved hand and squeezed it. "You are the finest thing I have ever found, Hannah Stoltzfus," he said. Be happy. Promise me you'll be happy. I promise, she whispered. Caleb got into his truck. He didn't look back. He put it in gear and drove slowly away, the taillights fading into the darkness like dye in embers. Hannah stood alone on the bridge. She opened the box. Inside was a small wooden quilting square, carved with impossible detail, and etched on the back was a single word. Freedom. He had understood. Freedom wasn't just about going where you wanted. It was about choosing who you wanted to be. And she had chosen. The summer sun was warm on Hannah's back. The farmhouse had been painted fresh white. A younger sister was getting married, and the house was full of laughter and the smell of roasting chicken. Hannah sat on the porch, a quilt draped over her lap. It was a new designer blend of traditional patterns, with something new, something that looked like a bridge crossing over water. Mongim? A small voice called. A little boy, 3 years old, with bright eyes and a straw hat, ran up the steps. He was holding a beetle. Look, Monghem. Anna smiled, smoothing his hair. She had married Samuel Miller 2 years after that night at the bridge. Samuel was a good man, a quiet man who loved the land. He didn't make her heart race like Caleb had, but he gave her a steady, burning warmth that comforted her. It is a fine beetle, Amos, she told her son. She looked out toward the road. The covered bridge was still there, strong and sturdy. Every time she crossed it, she touched the wooden railing and said a silent prayer for a carpenter she once knew. She didn't wonder what if anymore. She looked at her son. She looked at the quilt in her hands, and she looked at the harvest ready in the fields. She had chosen this life, and in choosing it, she had made it truly hers. Hannah picked up her needle. The thread followed her hand, stitching the layers together, making something strong, something that would last.